My name is Sarah Chin, and this is the story of how one Thanksgiving dinner revealed family secrets so devastating that they changed everything I believed about love, loyalty, and the people I trusted most. This story isn't just about revenge or dramatic revelations. It's about what happens when years of hidden pain, secret betrayals, and family cruelty finally collide in the most explosive way possible. I had always been the overlooked sister in my family. While my older sister Emma was blessed with natural beauty, social confidence, and what seemed like effortless success in everything she attempted, I was the quiet one who struggled with self-doubt and spent most of my childhood feeling invisible. Emma had always been mom and dad's golden child. She was homecoming queen in high school, captain of the debate team, and valedictorian of her graduating class. She received a full scholarship to a prestigious university where she studied business and marketing, graduating summa cum laude with multiple job offers from Fortune 500 companies. Emma landed a high-paying position at a national advertising agency, where she quickly climbed the corporate ladder through a combination of natural talent, strategic networking, and an unwavering focus on success. She met Marcus during her junior year of college, and their relationship seemed like something from a romantic movie. He was handsome, ambitious, and came from a wealthy family that immediately embraced Emma as the perfect match for their son. Their wedding was featured in the local society pages, a lavish affair with 300 guests held at the most exclusive country club in the city. By age 28, Emma had what appeared to be the perfect life: a corner office with a six-figure salary, a sprawling suburban home with manicured gardens, and two adorable children, Isabella and Matthew, who were the absolute center of our parents' universe. Emma seemed to effortlessly balance her demanding career with motherhood, always appearing perfectly put together at family gatherings with stories about client successes, school achievements, and elaborate family vacations. She had created the life that our parents had always dreamed of for their children, complete with financial security, social status, and the kind of picture-perfect family that appeared in holiday card advertisements. I took a different path. I became a social worker, dedicating my career to helping vulnerable children and families navigate crisis situations. The work was emotionally demanding and poorly paid, but it gave me a sense of purpose that I had never found elsewhere. I loved being able to make a difference in children's lives, even when the victories were small and the heartbreaks were frequent. My romantic life had been more complicated than Emma's fairy tale story. I had dated several men seriously, but none of those relationships had developed into marriage. By age 32, I was single and increasingly aware that my biological clock was ticking loudly. The issue of children had become a source of growing tension with my family. Emma never missed an opportunity to comment on my single status and my lack of children. During family gatherings, she would make pointed remarks about how fulfilled motherhood made her feel, how sorry she felt for women who missed out on the joy of having children, and how important it was for our parents to have grandchildren to spoil. Her comments became increasingly frequent and cutting as I entered my 30s. At Isabella's birthday parties, Emma would make loud observations about how sad it was that some women focused so much on their careers that they forgot about biological clocks. During Christmas celebrations, she would talk extensively about family traditions and how important it was to pass them down through generations, always with meaningful glances in my direction. Emma had a particular talent for making these remarks seem caring and sympathetic while delivering maximum emotional damage. She would sigh deeply and mention how worried she was about my happiness, suggesting that professional achievements could never replace the fulfillment that came from raising children. She would offer to set me up with divorced fathers from her children's schools, always emphasizing that my options were becoming more limited as I got older. The worst part was how our parents would nod along with Emma's observations, clearly sharing her concern about my childless status. During quiet moments, Mom would pull me aside to ask about my dating life, expressing hope that I would find someone soon so I could experience the joy of motherhood before it was too late. These comments always stung, but they became particularly painful after I began struggling with fertility issues. I had been trying to conceive for over 2 years, first with my most recent boyfriend, and then, after our relationship ended, through fertility treatments and artificial insemination. The process had been emotionally and financially devastating. Multiple rounds of in vitro fertilization had failed, each cycle costing over $8,000 and requiring weeks of hormone injections, daily blood tests, and invasive procedures. I had endured 3 miscarriages during the early stages of treatment, each loss devastating my hope a little more. The fertility clinic became a second home where I spent countless hours in waiting rooms filled with other women facing similar struggles. I memorized the faces of nurses, knew the schedules of doctors, and could navigate the complex medical terminology that had become part of my daily vocabulary. The physical toll was exhausting, but the emotional impact was even worse. Every negative pregnancy test felt like a personal failure, and every well-meaning question about when I planned to have children was like salt in an open wound. I had spent over $30,000 of my savings and 2 years of my life pursuing motherhood through medical intervention, with nothing to show for it except mounting debt and shattered dreams. Doctors had told me that my chances of conceiving naturally were extremely low due to a combination of age-related factors and underlying medical issues that made pregnancy unlikely. The recommendation was to consider egg donation or gestational surrogacy, options that would cost even more money and involve even more complex emotional and logistical challenges. What made this situation even more heartbreaking was that I had been working with adoption agencies for the past year, hoping to become a mother through adoption. The process was lengthy and complex, involving background checks, home studies, interviews, and endless paperwork. I was finally nearing approval as a prospective adoptive parent, but the timeline was uncertain and the emotional investment was enormous. I hadn't shared the details of my fertility struggles or adoption plans with my family because I knew Emma would find ways to make the situation about herself or use my difficulties as ammunition for her cruel comments. I had learned over the years that sharing personal challenges with Emma usually resulted in judgment, unsolicited advice, or subtle mockery disguised as concern. Marcus, Emma's husband, had always been kind to me in a way that stood out sharply against Emma's typical behavior. He was thoughtful, genuinely interested in my work, and seemed to understand the emotional toll that my job took on me. Marcus would ask about my cases, remember details from previous conversations, and offer encouragement when I was dealing with particularly difficult situations. Over the years, Marcus and I had developed what I thought was a warm, supportive relationship that provided a welcome contrast to Emma's constant criticism. He seemed to appreciate my dedication to helping children, and he often expressed admiration for my resilience and compassion. What I didn't realize until much later was that Marcus's attention and interest went far beyond family affection. About 18 months before this Thanksgiving dinner, Marcus had begun reaching out to me more frequently. He would text me articles related to my work, invite me to lunch when he was in my area for business meetings, and call to check on me when he knew I was dealing with stressful cases. At first, these interactions felt like genuine friendship and support. Marcus was easy to talk to, he listened without judgment, and he seemed to understand my professional challenges in ways that my own family never had. I was grateful to have someone in my life who valued my work and offered emotional support during difficult times. But gradually, Marcus's attention became more personal and intimate. He would share concerns about his marriage with Emma, express frustration with her materialistic priorities and controlling behavior, and hint that he felt trapped in a relationship that had lost its emotional connection. I should have recognized these conversations as inappropriate and maintained better boundaries. But I was lonely, emotionally vulnerable from my fertility struggles, and starved for the kind of understanding and support that Marcus seemed to offer. The situation escalated during a particularly devastating period when I had just experienced my third failed fertility treatment. I was emotionally shattered and questioning whether I would ever become a mother. Marcus had called to check on me, and what started as a supportive conversation became increasingly intimate and personal. Marcus told me that he had always admired my strength and compassion, that he thought I would make an incredible mother, and that any man would be lucky to build a family with someone like me. The conversation continued over several hours, during which Marcus revealed that he had been having serious doubts about his marriage and had been thinking about me more than was appropriate for a married man. That night, Marcus came to my apartment under the pretense of bringing me dinner and offering comfort during my difficult time. What happened next was a mistake that would haunt both of us for the rest of our lives. I slept with my sister's husband. The affair lasted for about 6 weeks, during which time I convinced myself that Marcus was genuinely in love with me and planning to leave Emma. He would tell me about how unhappy his marriage had become, how Emma had changed since having children, and how he felt like he was living with a stranger who cared more about appearances and social status than emotional intimacy. Marcus painted himself as a victim of Emma's neglect and manipulation, and I allowed myself to believe that we had found real love in the midst of our respective loneliness and dissatisfaction. The affair ended abruptly when Marcus confessed that he couldn't go through with leaving his family. He told me that despite his feelings for me, he felt obligated to stay married for the sake of his children and couldn't handle the social and financial consequences of divorce. I was devastated but not entirely surprised. Deep down, I had known that Marcus was unlikely to leave his comfortable life with Emma, and I had been foolish to believe that our relationship would lead to anything permanent. What I didn't know was that our brief affair had resulted in pregnancy. I discovered I was pregnant about 3 weeks after Marcus ended our relationship. The irony was devastating. After years of struggling with infertility and failed treatments, I had conceived during a relationship that was doomed from the start with a man who belonged to someone else. I was faced with an impossible decision. I could tell Marcus about the pregnancy, which would likely destroy his marriage and my relationship with my family. I could have an abortion, which felt morally wrong given how desperately I had wanted to become a mother. Or I could carry the pregnancy to term and raise the child alone, never revealing Marcus's identity as the father. I chose the third option, but with a twist that I thought would protect everyone involved. I decided to give birth to the baby and then pursue adoption through official channels, placing the child with a loving family who could provide the stable, two-parent home that I couldn't offer as a single mother. This seemed like the most responsible choice for everyone involved. The baby would have loving parents, Marcus wouldn't face the consequences of his infidelity, and I could move forward with my life without the constant reminder of my worst mistake. But there was one detail I hadn't anticipated. The adoption agency I was already working with had approved me as a prospective adoptive parent. When I explained my situation to my caseworker, that I was pregnant but wanted to place the child for adoption and then adopt a different child later, she suggested an alternative arrangement. The agency proposed that I give birth to my baby, place the child temporarily in foster care for a brief period to meet legal requirements, and then adopt my own biological child through official channels. This would give me time to establish myself as a single parent, ensure that all legal requirements were met, and provide a pathway to parenthood that would be completely legitimate and above board. The arrangement was unusual, but not unprecedented. It would require careful coordination and extensive documentation, but it would allow me to become a mother while protecting Marcus's secret and maintaining the appearance that I was adopting an unrelated child. For 9 months, I managed to hide my pregnancy from my family while working with the adoption agency to prepare for this complex arrangement. I told my family that I was taking a temporary leave from work to focus on my mental health after my fertility struggles, which explained my reduced social contact and frequent medical appointments. The pregnancy was emotionally complicated, but physically healthy. I gave birth to a beautiful baby girl in a city about 2 hours from where my family lived, placed her temporarily with a foster family, and began the process of legally adopting her as her birth mother. The entire arrangement took about 4 months to finalize, during which time I was able to visit my daughter regularly and maintain a relationship with her while completing the adoption paperwork. By the time Thanksgiving arrived, I had been officially approved to adopt my own biological daughter, and I was preparing to bring her home permanently within the next few weeks. I had planned to announce my adoption at Thanksgiving dinner as a way of sharing my joy with my family and finally silencing Emma's comments about my childless status. I had carefully prepared explanations about the adoption process, the timeline for bringing my daughter home, and my excitement about becoming a mother. What I hadn't anticipated was that Emma would choose that particular Thanksgiving dinner to launch her most vicious attack yet on my life choices and personal failures. The dinner started normally enough. Mom had prepared her traditional feast, and the family had gathered to share what we were grateful for during the past year. Emma talked about her children's achievements, her husband's promotion at work, and their upcoming vacation to Europe. But when it was my turn to share, Emma interrupted before I could speak. She launched into a monologue about how grateful she was to have children and how sorry she felt for people who had missed out on the joy of parenthood. She talked about how fulfilling motherhood was, how it gave life meaning and purpose that career achievements could never match, and how sad it was when women focused so much on work that they forgot about family. Emma's comments were clearly directed at me, and everyone at the table knew it. She talked about how important it was for women to prioritize family over career while they were still young enough to have children, and how tragic it was when people realized too late that professional success couldn't replace the love and fulfillment that came from raising children. Then Emma looked directly at me and delivered what was clearly intended to be the most hurtful blow. She said she felt especially sorry for women who were getting older without having children, because it must be so lonely and meaningless to go through life without the purpose and joy that motherhood provided. She mentioned how grateful she was that her children would grow up with cousins from Marcus's side of the family, since it didn't look like they would have any cousins from our side. The entire table fell silent as everyone processed the cruelty of Emma's comments. Even our parents looked uncomfortable with how personal and hurtful her remarks had become. Marcus was staring at his plate, clearly uncomfortable with his wife's attack on me, but unwilling to defend me in a way that would draw attention to his own behavior. That's when I decided that I'd had enough of Emma's cruelty and that it was time to reveal some truths that would change her perspective dramatically. I stood up from the table and announced that I had news to share that would address Emma's concerns about my childless status. I told my family that I was in the process of adopting a baby girl and would be bringing her home within the next few weeks. I explained that I had been working with adoption agencies for over a year, had completed all the required screening and preparation, and was excited to finally become a mother. The reaction was immediate and positive. Mom started crying with joy, Dad began asking questions about the adoption process, and even Emma seemed surprised but pleased that I was finally going to have a child. But I wasn't finished with my announcement. I explained that this adoption was particularly special because I had been able to develop a relationship with the birth father, who had been involved throughout the pregnancy and was supportive of my adoption plan. Then I looked directly at Marcus and said that I thought everyone at the table should meet the birth father, since he was already part of our family. The confusion on everyone's faces was obvious as they tried to understand what I was saying. Marcus had gone completely pale and was staring at me with an expression of absolute terror. I explained that the birth father was someone we all knew and trusted, someone who had always been supportive of my desire to become a mother, and someone who understood the importance of family. Finally, I revealed that Marcus was the father of the child I was adopting, and that our daughter had been conceived during a brief relationship that had ended before I realized I was pregnant. The silence that followed my revelation was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room, and everyone was frozen in shock. Emma's face went through several expressions: confusion, disbelief, understanding, and then absolute rage. She looked back and forth between Marcus and me as if she couldn't process what she had just heard. Marcus appeared to be in complete shock. His face was white, his hands were shaking, and he looked like he might faint or vomit. He opened his mouth several times, but no words came out. Mom and Dad were staring at me with expressions of horror and disappointment that cut deeper than any anger could have. Emma was the first person to find her voice, and when she did, it was with a scream that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her. She demanded to know if what I had said was true, whether I had really slept with her husband and gotten pregnant with his child. She asked how long the affair had lasted, whether it was still going on, and how I could have betrayed her so completely. Marcus finally managed to speak, confirming that what I had said was true, and apologizing to Emma with tears streaming down his face. He tried to explain that the affair had been brief, that it had happened during a difficult time in their marriage, and that he had ended it because he realized he loved his family too much to lose them. But Emma wasn't interested in explanations or apologies. She turned on both Marcus and me with a fury that was terrifying to witness. She screamed at Marcus for betraying their marriage and their children, for lying to her for over a year, and for destroying their family with his selfishness and infidelity. Then she turned to me with even greater rage, calling me every cruel name she could think of and accusing me of deliberately seducing her husband out of jealousy and spite. She said that I had always been jealous of her happiness and had finally found a way to destroy it. Emma's accusations cut deep because they contained enough truth to be devastating. I had been jealous of her seemingly perfect life, and I had made choices that I knew would hurt her even if she never found out about them. The dinner ended with Emma storming out of the house, followed by Marcus, who was trying to explain himself while she screamed at him to leave her alone. Their children, who had been playing in another room during dinner, were confused and frightened by the yelling and crying. Mom and Dad were left sitting at the table looking at me with expressions of disappointment and bewilderment that broke my heart. They couldn't understand how I could have done something so destructive to our family, and they were struggling to process the revelation that their future grandchild was the product of such a painful betrayal. The aftermath of that Thanksgiving dinner was swift and devastating. Emma filed for divorce within the week, demanding full custody of their children and half of all marital assets. She also obtained a restraining order preventing Marcus from contacting me, which complicated the adoption process significantly. Marcus lost his job after Emma shared details of his infidelity with his employer, claiming that his affair with his sister-in-law created a scandal that reflected poorly on the company's values. My parents were deeply hurt and disappointed in both Marcus and me, but they were particularly angry with me for deliberately destroying Emma's family and using Thanksgiving dinner as the venue for such a devastating revelation. The adoption of my daughter proceeded despite the chaos, but it was complicated by the legal requirements surrounding Marcus's parental rights and the need to protect all parties involved from further conflict. Emma refused to have any contact with me or with my daughter, whom she viewed as a permanent reminder of her husband's betrayal and the destruction of her marriage. The revelation also affected my extended family and social circle. Many people took Emma's side, viewing me as the homewrecker who had destroyed a marriage and traumatized innocent children. Others were more sympathetic, understanding that the affair was a mutual mistake that had escalated beyond what either Marcus or I had intended. But the most difficult part of the aftermath was watching the impact on Emma's children, who were caught in the middle of their parents' bitter divorce and struggling to understand why their family had suddenly fallen apart. 6 months after that Thanksgiving dinner, I moved to another state with my daughter to start over in a place where our complicated history wouldn't follow us. The move was necessary for my mental health and my daughter's future, but it meant giving up my career in social work and leaving behind the few family relationships that had survived the scandal. Emma and Marcus eventually finalized their divorce, with Emma receiving primary custody of their children and substantial financial support. Marcus moved to a different city and has had limited contact with his children since the divorce was finalized. My relationship with my parents has slowly begun to heal, though it will never be the same as it was before. They have met their granddaughter and are working to build a relationship with her, but they still struggle with the circumstances of her birth and the pain that our choices caused Emma. Today, 3 years after that devastating Thanksgiving dinner, I am raising my daughter as a single mother and working to build a life that honors the love I feel for her while acknowledging the pain that her existence has caused others. My daughter is healthy, happy, and blissfully unaware of the complicated circumstances that brought her into the world. She knows that her daddy lives far away and that she has a loving family that includes grandparents who adore her. I've struggled with guilt and regret about the choices I made, particularly the decision to reveal the truth in such a public and hurtful way. Looking back, I realized that there were better ways to handle the situation that could have protected Emma's children from trauma and preserved some family relationships. But I also understand that Emma's years of cruelty and dismissiveness had created a reservoir of anger and hurt that exploded in the worst possible way when I finally had the power to hurt her as deeply as she had hurt me. The affair with Marcus was a mistake born out of loneliness, vulnerability, and poor judgment. The decision to reveal the truth at Thanksgiving dinner was motivated by years of accumulated pain and a desire to finally silence Emma's cruel comments about my childlessness. Neither choice was defensible, but both were human responses to complicated emotional situations that had been building for years. I've learned that revenge, even when it feels justified, rarely brings the satisfaction or resolution that we expect. Destroying Emma's marriage didn't make me feel better about my own struggles, and it created new forms of pain and guilt that will last for the rest of my life. I've also learned that family relationships are more fragile than we often realize, and that some betrayals create wounds that never fully heal. Most importantly, I've learned that becoming a mother through such painful circumstances has given me both the greatest joy and the heaviest burden of my life. My daughter deserves to grow up knowing that she is loved unconditionally, regardless of the mistakes that led to her conception. She also deserves to eventually understand her own story in a way that helps her make sense of her place in our complicated family history. Emma may have mocked me for being childless at that Thanksgiving dinner, but the truth was that I was already a mother. I just hadn't figured out how to navigate the consequences of how my daughter came to exist. The revelation that Marcus was the father wasn't revenge in the traditional sense. It was the messy, painful truth finally being spoken aloud by someone who was tired of pretending that her life was anything other than complicated. Sometimes the most devastating truths are the ones that have been hiding in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to destroy everything we thought we knew about the people we love. That Thanksgiving dinner revealed that all of us, Emma, Marcus, and I, were capable of cruelty, selfishness, and betrayal in ways that none of us had imagined. But it also revealed that even in the aftermath of devastating mistakes, it's possible to build something meaningful from the wreckage if you're willing to accept responsibility for your choices and focus on protecting the innocent people who are affected by them. My daughter will grow up knowing that she is wanted, loved, and cherished, even if the story of how she came to be is complicated and painful. That may not be the fairy tale ending that any of us imagined, but it's the truth we're all learning to live with.